Imagine trying to overthrow a government.
Right.
So, like, imagine trying to do it from a rented conference room 3,000 miles away.
Yeah, that's tough.
If you're armed with nothing but a microphone,
Right.
a really carefully tailored suit, and a photo op with some foreign politician. I mean, how do you convince an entire nation that you're their rightful leader when you haven't even set foot on their soil in decades?
It's really the ultimate political illusion, isn't it?
Totally.
Because when an opposition figure doesn't hold actual power, I mean, when they literally cannot draft legislation or, mobilize a massive rally in their own capital, the entire battle for legitimacy just completely shifts.
It changes the whole game.
Exactly. It stops being about actual governance. It becomes entirely about optics, right?
Yeah.
Strategy, alliances, and, well, controlling the media narrative from afar.
And that is the incredibly complex tightrope walk we're exploring in today's deep dive. So, welcome.
Glad to be here.
We are looking at a really highly charged audio interview today. It was broadcast on a Persian program called Radio Irava.
Yeah, a fascinating lesson.
Very. And the guest is a freelance journalist, Soheila Dashti. Basically, in this interview, she performs just a complete forensic takedown of a recent European political tour by Reza Pahlavi.
The exiled son of the former Shah of Iran.
Exactly. And while she's doing that, she uses that exact same critique to launch this passionate defense of a rival exiled opposition group.
Right, the MEK.
Yeah, the People's Mojahedin Organization of Iran and its political umbrella, the National Council of Resistance of Iran.
And we really need to pause here and make something crystal clear right out of the gate for everyone listening.
Oh, absolutely.
This source material is intensely partisan, highly charged.
Extremely.
This interview represents an active and honestly often very bitter political conflict that is currently playing out within the Iranian diaspora.
It's ongoing right now.
Right. So we are definitely not taking sides here. We're not endorsing Dashti's viewpoints or Pahlavi's platform or the MEK's history, for that matter.
No, not at all. Our mission today for this deep dive is simply to pull apart the anatomy of these arguments for you.
Unpack the strategies.
Exactly. We want to see how these political narratives are engineered and really how rival factions battle for this mantle of leadership when they are, literally locked out of their own country.
And Dashti's breakdown of Pahlavi's trip to Stockholm, it's a masterclass in how to dismantle a political rival's public relations strategy.
She really doesn't hold back.
Not even a little. She frames his entire visit not as some diplomatic victory, but as a just catastrophic failure in international diplomacy.
So to understand the mechanics of her critique, I think we first have to look at the foundational strategy of, any exiled leader.
Right. What are they actually trying to achieve over there?
Exactly. If you're claiming to be this democratic uniting force for your home country's future, your primary goal abroad is to build broad mainstream consensus.
You want the heavy hitters?
Yeah, you want the backing of the major centrist institutions of whatever country is hosting you.
Which makes sense.
But Dashti zeroes in on a major strategic vulnerability here with Pahlavi. She points out that he simply could not get that mainstream audience in Sweden.
Right, he just didn't have the pull.
No, instead he had to settle. She notes that he was invited to the Swedish parliament by members of basically only two parties.
Okay, who were they?
You've got the Christian Democrats, including their leader, Energy Minister Ebba Busch.
Okay.
And then you have the Sweden Democrats. And this alignment is where Dashti really twists the knife.
Why is that?
Well, because the Sweden Democrats are not your standard conservative party. They have these historical ideological roots tied to neo-Nazism.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And their modern platform is aggressively anti-immigrant and anti-Islamic.
Which, that creates a staggering political paradox right there.
It really does.
You have an Iranian political figure, someone who is fundamentally viewed as an immigrant in the eyes of European border politics, seeking to build his own legitimacy by aligning with European political factions whose core identity is hostile to immigrants from the Middle East.
It's kind of wild when you put it like that.
It is. Dashti's analysis suggests his team was so desperate for Western validation that they just ignored the immense ideological baggage of the people actually providing it.
It's like throwing a VIP networking event to prove you're this massive industry titan.
Right.
But the only people who show up are like the local crypto scammers.
That's a great way to put it.
Sure, you have a crowd, you get to take a few photos, but you've just tied your entire reputation to the least credible people in the building.
And even with those fringe alliances, she notes the turnout was dismal.
Oh, completely. Despite claims that, maybe tens of thousands of supporters might rally outside, Dashti reports that inside the building there were only about 40 to 70 people.
Wait, really? That's it?
That's it. And get this, they weren't even in the main parliamentary chamber. They were in a rented side room.
Ah, the side room. That detail is actually key to understanding how diaspora media functions.
How so?
Well, in many democratic parliaments, individual representatives can just reserve these side rooms for private events, right?
Like booking a study room at the library.
Basically, yeah. Booking one does not equate to an official state reception or any form of endorsement by the Swedish government whatsoever.
Right.
But here's how the mechanism works. A camera crew frames a really tight shot of the candidate speaking in that room.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. And that footage is then beamed via satellite TV networks like Iran International or Menodo directly into living rooms in Tehran or Shiraz.
So the viewer back home has no idea.
Exactly. The viewer in Iran doesn't know it's a side room rented by some fringe politician. They just see this grand European institutional architecture in the background.
Wow.
It's literally an optical illusion designed to project state backing.
But, illusions are fragile. And Dashti highlights a moment where the facade is completely shattered during this trip.
What happened?
So during this visit, a Green Party representative named Jacob Risberg reportedly confronted Pahlavi face-to-face.
Oh, wow.
In person. In person. He called Pahlavi's father a dictator with blood on his hands and accused the son of having no real democratic program for the future.
That is a disaster for PR.
Yeah. When a sitting member of parliament crashes your carefully curated photo op to call you a dictator, the illusion of unanimous Western support vanishes instantly.
And that failure in the parliamentary building, it bleeds directly into his broader failure with the Swedish public, honestly.
Oh, for sure.
Because operating in a foreign country requires at least a baseline understanding of that country's political climate.
Right, you have to read the room.
And Swedish polling consistently shows that roughly 70% of the public is firmly against the current military conflicts playing out across the Middle East.
70%, that's huge.
Massive. The national sentiment is overwhelmingly focused on peace, neutrality, diplomacy.
Yet right in the middle of a country where 7 out of 10 people are strictly anti-war, Pahlavi allegedly sat down with a Swedish reporter and stated that the U.S. and Israel should, quote, finish the job in the Middle East.
It's just a massive misalignment of the room. You simply cannot pitch a pro-war hawkish stance in a country whose modern identity is built on de-escalation.
Right. And Dashti uses this to paint him as dangerously out of touch.
Definitely.
He's speaking to the Swedish press, but he's using rhetoric that seems designed to appeal to, hardline factions back in the U.S., or maybe hawkish elements in the diaspora.
He totally forgot who was actually holding the microphone.
Exactly. And the Swedish media reacted exactly as you might expect when a guest wildly misreads the cultural room like that.
I bet they weren't kind.
Not at all. Dashti cites the prominent Swedish newspaper Expressen. They labeled him ambitious but controversial.
Ouch.
Yeah, and they essentially mocked his lack of political acumen. They saw right through the performance.
Well, and when the international media stops buying your political messaging, they start looking very closely at your personal brand.
Yes, and this is where Dashti aims her next critique. She just systematically dismantles the persona he's cultivated for decades.
Right, she goes after his whole background.
She goes right after his frequent claims of being a trained pilot. She uses this brilliant, honestly devastating analogy.
The museum one.
Yeah. She compares his claims to someone walking into the Smithsonian Museum in D.C., taking a photo next to the Apollo space capsule while holding a plastic helmet.
And then demanding to be called an astronaut.
Exactly.
It's a sharp comedic image, but, the rhetorical purpose is absolutely lethal.
Totally.
Because the image of the dashing military-trained prince that has been central to his brand since the 1980s.
Right.
So by comparing him to a tourist playing dress-up at a museum, she's trying to strip away all that manufactured, inherited authority.
She wants to frame him not as a commander-in-chief in waiting,
but as a civilian coasting on his father's resume.
Exactly. And the hyper-scrutiny, it doesn't even stop at his resume. It extends to his actual physical body.
The body language analysis.
Yes. The Radio Irava host and Dashti spend quite a bit of time analyzing Pahlavi's body language, Specifically, his habit of holding his hands behind his back when he's standing around or speaking off camera.
Right, they call this the royal pose.
The royal pose. They argue this specific posture is a deliberate choice. Like, he's doing it to project superiority, demand submission from the people around him, and maintain this strict class distance.
Though they do briefly acknowledge the rumors, right?
Yeah, they do briefly mention rumors that he might just be hiding a physical tremor, like Parkinson's. But they heavily, heavily lean into the arrogance angle.
Well, in the realm of exile politics, where you don't have a voting record or legislative achievements to attack, the political body itself becomes the battleground.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Every single micro-expression, the cut of a suit, the way a person stands, all of it is weaponized by opponents to construct a narrative about who that person really is behind closed doors.
I mean, I have to push back on this specific line of attack, though.
Oh, really? Why?
Well, I stand with my hands behind my back when I'm, waiting in line at the grocery store.
Sure.
It's a remarkably common resting posture. Public speakers do it, military personnel do it, or honestly just anyone whose back hurts.
Fair point.
So, is Dashti really expecting us to believe this is some calculated monarchical power play? Doesn't this cross the line from political analysis into just, projecting whatever bias you already have onto a completely neutral action?
It's a completely fair challenge. Objectively speaking, yes, a posture is just a posture.
Right.
But in the theater of political narrative, objective truth often takes a backseat to symbolic resonance.
Yeah.
Dashti seizes on this visual cue because it perfectly reinforces her central underlying argument.
Which is?
That Pahlavi represents a return to an unequal dictatorial past, not a democratic future.
Oh, I see.
She's using the royal pose to say to her audience, look at his body language. He doesn't view himself as your equal. He views himself as your ruler.
And if you already suspect he harbors authoritarian tendencies.
Exactly. Seeing him stand like a 19th century monarch just cements that bias right in your mind.
Wow. Okay, which brings us to the pivot. Dashti spends all this time tearing down Pahlavi's approach as a hollow, optics-driven stunt, specifically to set the stage for her preferred alternative.
Right, the MEK.
Yes, she wants the listener to contrast Pahlavi's superficiality with the group she passionately defends. And she does this by drawing a stark line between the types of people who support each faction.
She's really trying to win the battle for technocratic credibility here.
Technocratic credibility. Okay, unpack that.
Well, she frames the royalist supporters in Europe as these loud, disruptive hooligans who brawl in the streets and shout abuse.
Basically implying they lack the discipline to actually govern.
Exactly. And in contrast, she highlights the MUK's deep intellectual bench. She wants to portray them not just as a resistance group, but as a highly educated government in waiting.
Right. She specifically points to highly educated supporters in the diaspora. She mentions this engineer named Rufi, who's apparently working on the new Artemis moon missions.
Which is a very deliberate name drop.
Oh, totally. She's saying, look at the socioeconomic and educational caliber of the people aligned with our movement. We have aerospace engineers. They have street brawlers.
Because if you are an exiled organization, you have to prove to the international community and to the citizens back home that if the current regime falls tomorrow, you're ready.
Ready to step in.
Right. You need the infrastructure, the experts, the discipline to keep the lights on and run the country. Highlighting scientists and engineers is a direct signal of stability and competence.
But, that claim of competence runs into a massive structural hurdle. And the radio host actually brings it up during the interview.
Ah, yes. The leadership structure.
It's the alphabet soup of the MEK leadership, which, let's be honest, can be incredibly confusing if you don't follow this closely.
It really can.
You have the NCRI, the MEK, and then you have the Rajavis. The host asks this great question. Why is Masood Rajavi the historical founder and ideological architect of the group? Why is he only ever heard via audio messages?
Right, he's basically invisible.
Exactly. Meanwhile, his wife, Maryam Ravi, who acts as the public political face of the movement, she's out taking photos, much like Pahlavi.
The radio host is really poking at a known vulnerability there. Why is the ideological founder of your movement essentially a ghost?
Right. So how does Dashti defend that?
Well, her defense requires delving into the very real, very bloody history of Iranian opposition in Europe. She cites severe security threats, pointing to a wave of assassinations carried out by regime hit squads in the 1980s and 90s.
She explicitly mentions Kazim Rahavi and Hossein Nagdi.
Exactly.
And these aren't just random names. These were prominent opposition figures who were literally gunned down on European soil.
It was a very dangerous time.
Dashti is trying to explain that the extreme secrecy surrounding Masood Rahavi isn't some bizarre quirk. She frames it as a necessary survival tactic.
Forged in an era when being a visible opposition leader in Europe meant a very high probability of being assassinated.
But she takes it a step further, right?
She does. She argues that because of this lethal environment, the MEK had to evolve beyond a personality cult centered on one man's face. She suggests they became a hardened ideological institution. Their survival depends on strict operational security, intense internal discipline, and a shared historical legitimacy.
So it's about the mission, not the man.
Exactly. In her view, an organization built on that kind of sacrifice is infinitely more durable than a movement built around Pahlavi showing up for a photo op in a Swedish side room.
I hear that, but man, if your leader is just an audio recording, it feels like a podcast, not a revolution.
That's a sharp way of putting it.
I mean, we live in an era dominated by TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. Young people inside Iran are risking their lives communicating through highly visual viral media every single day.
They absolutely are.
So, can an opposition group truly inspire a modern youth-led revolution if its primary ideological founder remains completely unseen? Relying on, audio cassettes from an undisclosed location, how does Dashti possibly spin that invisibility as a strength in 2026?
Well, she spins it by framing visibility as a luxury of the unserious.
Interesting.
Yeah, in a modern media environment that demands, parasocial relationships and constant selfies from political leaders, relying on audio does feel antiquated to the average observer.
Very.
But Dashti attempts to flip that perceived weakness by equating visibility with superficiality.
Ah, I see.
She argues that while rival figures are safely smiling for the cameras in Stockholm, her movement is making the hard, disciplined, often unpopular choices necessary to survive a lethal enemy. The lack of visibility becomes proof of the seriousness of their struggle.
Wow. It's the ultimate narrative contrast she's trying to build.
Exactly.
You have the highly visible prince playing dress-up who has never bled for the cause, versus the invisible, disciplined resistance that is paid in blood for 40 years.
That is the exact architecture of the argument she constructs throughout the entire interview.
And this brings us to the core takeaway from this whole deep dive, really. Whether you find Dashti's arguments brilliant or fundamentally flawed, what she reveals is this intense, almost existential battle for legitimacy within the diaspora.
It is fierce.
It's a war fought not just against the government in Tehran, but laterally, between rival factions sitting right next to each other in Europe and America.
And they are using everything at their disposal.
Everything.
They are weaponizing historical grievances, analyzing micro-expressions in body language, leveraging the socioeconomic status of their supporters.
And turning rented European parliamentary side rooms into optical illusions of state power.
Yes. Every single action is heavily calculated to send a message to multiple audiences simultaneously.
They're constantly trying to signal to the host countries that they're diplomatic and stable, right?
Yep.
While at the same time signaling to the international media that they have grassroots support. All while trying to project an aura of inevitable victory to the people back home.
It is a dizzying amount of plates to keep spinning.
It really is. Which leaves us with a critical, lingering question for you all to think about. We started this deep dive by imagining the bizarre reality of running a shadow government from thousands of miles away.
Right.
When an exiled political movement spends decades outside its own borders, when its daily survival relies on courting foreign political parties, managing international PR battles, and obsessing over the optics of European press conferences. At what point do they risk losing touch entirely with the actual day-to-day desires of the people living inside the country they hope to govern?
At what point does the polished performance of politics in exile completely detach from the messy, urgent reality of the people actually on the ground?
It's the ultimate danger of the diaspora tightrope.
Yeah.
You can spend all your time convincing the world you are the rightful leader, only to realize the people back home stopped listening decades ago.